from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay. Still rolling along, a bit of history is back riding the rails.
Yeah, we see where it goes, and none's going to China.
The trade war tiff between the U.S. and China, a closer look at the impact on the cotton industry, as a new round of trade talks are set to begin.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Today is the day China's Vice Premier returns to the U.S. for another round of trade talks, and all eyes are watching to see if the two sides can come to agreement before tariffs increase on Chinese goods this Friday. Over the weekend, President Trump announcing on Twitter tariffs would be increasing on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods from 10 to 25%. The U.S. Trade Representative filing paperwork for it on Wednesday. Now, Reuters reporting the president's tweets came after a diplomatic cable from China arrived in Washington Friday night. It reportedly contained several edits by China to a nearly 150-page draft of the trade agreement. The edits basically reversing months of negotiations between the two countries. The president then taking to Twitter again yesterday saying, quote, China has just informed us that they are now coming to the U.S. to make a deal. We'll see, but I am very happy with over $100 billion a year in tariffs filling U.S. coffers. Great for us, not good for China, end quote. The president also suggesting via Twitter that China may be holding out in order to negotiate with a different administration. Now, China's Commerce Ministry says it will take necessary countermeasures if the U.S. tariffs go into effect. And take a look at this video, reportedly from China in the Hainan province. This was posted on Twitter, showing dozens of people waiting in long lines for pork. African swine fever reportedly causing shortages in China, and cold storage reserves are depleting.
And so the losses are massive, larger than the entire U.S. hog production on an annual basis. So if you can imagine the potential opportunity for not just pork, but really all protein leaving the U.S. As these consumers in other parts of the world really have no alternative but to look to other big producing nations like the U.S., Europe, Brazil, Canada for their protein supplies.
Now, McCracken says the best figures show China is looking at a 16 million metric ton deficit in pork due to ASF. Other large exporters like the U.S. will likely help fill the gap, but she does expect higher prices here at home. The Trump administration is not backing down on its promise to raise tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese imports, up to 25% by the end of the work week. However, China has been shy about buying some ag products for a while now. Betsy Gibbon joins us from a cotton warehouse in East Central Georgia. Betsy.
Cotton is moving out of the Midville warehouse in Midville, Georgia. Next stop, a container heading straight to the port of Savannah, where it will be shipped around the world.
We're seeing more in our warehouse big time this year, but still the lots that we see going are still going for export. We're loading containers now.
This shipment is likely going to Vietnam, but China has been absent from this gin's manifest. They have been since retaliatory tariffs began between the U.S. and China.
And gin owners say now is the time when the United States needs to make a trade agreement with China. Not only would it help the cotton market, but they say that lack of an export market is showing up in the warehouses.
Yeah, we see where it goes, and none's going to China. So we know they're not buying any cotton at all. And so definitely think the tariffs have hurt, no question about it.
However, China is still buying some cotton. According to USDA, for the week ending April 25th, primary sales of U.S. cotton were shipped to Vietnam, Turkey, and China. Aside from China, southern farmers are having other issues. A slew of hurricanes creating a squeeze in net farm income.
Last season, it was not a good harvest season here in this area. We had a pretty good growing season, but the harvest season was really wet. The net farm income was down this past year as a result of poor harvesting conditions.
The cotton price is quite different than a year ago, down roughly 20 cents from May 2018, when the December contract climbed to the mid-90s.
$1 cotton would make people plant more cotton, but 75 cents not that much of an incentive.
Back at the warehouse, Sandiford helps his growers forward contract their cotton. He says none of his growers have forward contracted for the growing season.
We're not seeing any forward contracting.
Have you ever had a spring where you haven't had any forward contracts like this?
Not this much, not this bad. We don't have a bale contracted this year.
The 75-cent window, yes, it's plantable. Yes, you make a little money there, but it's not where you're making a great amount of profit. Of course, a lot are waiting for about 80 cents.
As the loading continues, the ag community yearns for China to come back and import, and hopefully create a boost in the cotton market too. Reporting for Ag Day, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
It's been 6 months since the devastating Camp Fire in Paradise, California, but NPR is reporting there are still an estimated 1,000 or more families without temporary housing. AgDay's Betsy Gibbon visited Paradise shortly after the fire that destroyed thousands of homes and businesses. FEMA says it has provided about $85 million in aid to 8,000 households. Another $370 million in disaster loans has been distributed. NPR attributes the temporary housing problem to a severe housing shortage and a growing homeless population that was happening before the fire. And work continues to try and get disaster aid funding approved. Politico reporting Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is calling on the Senate to pass the aid package before the Memorial Day holiday. The negotiations have stalled over just how much money to give to Puerto Rico after it was hit by 2 hurricanes back in 2017. During a weekly Senate caucus lunch, it's reported Vice President Mike Pence signaled the administration wants the situation resolved. May isn't just the season for rain. There's typically some pretty severe storms that roll across farm country. Cindy Clausen has more in today's Crop Comments. Cindy.
That's right, Clinton. Severe weather working across the southern plains this week. Take a look at this picture from Twitter by Ryan Guerin with Ag Partners Co-op. Hail causing significant damage in wheat fields across Kansas. This was taken about 3 miles north of Clay Center. USDA says 14% of the state's winter wheat crop is headed, but that's way behind the 5-year average of 41%. 58% is called good to excellent. Let's take a look at the wind speed forecast for the day, and you could see it's going to be a fairly breezy day in much of the upper Midwest into the Great Lakes area. As we put this into motion, that's going to be the theme as we head through the day today. Overnight, we're going to see those winds dying down a bit, but picking up more in the northeast and also in parts of the southern plains and Four Corners region. Throughout your Friday, we'll see those winds picking up as another storm system starts to enter the northern plains. We'll have your national forecast coming up in just a few minutes, but first, here are some hometown temps.
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
When we come back, a look at the spring flush and what it could mean for dairy prices in the coming months. And later, 150 years since the infamous Golden Spike connected the United States, the railroad is still turning heads in Wyoming.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Mike North with Commodity Risk Management Group, our guest today. Mike, one thing you track pretty closely is the dairy market and seeing what's been going on with that. You know, we feel like maybe because production didn't grow in the last report that maybe we paused for a little bit, that there might be a little more optimism here. What's your take so far?
The reality is there is contraction that has been taking place, and the numbers bear it out. We saw a 94,000 cow decline from last January's peak to present.
Sure.
We saw that show up in the lower production number. Cow efficiency is still there.
Yes.
And in fact, cow efficiency grows. As you cull the herd of the worst animals, the best animals then are allowed to express themselves more. So cow efficiency generally shows up in more milk per cow.
Right.
And so that showed up again. We'll continue to see that. Right now we're coming through the spring flush.
Sure.
Milk is flowing through the country, and it's not to say that we are flooded with milk like we were last year, because we're not, but there's more present than there was as we came into the start of the year. And so we've seen some of the premium on milk erode a little bit. Cheese vats have been very active. We're through the big consumption window, and now we're moving into summer. And as we talk about the current scenario for supply, cheese inventories are still very bulky.
Yeah.
And when we look specifically at Italian type cheeses, there's a growing sense that that's becoming a little bit burdensome, and some of that may be coming to the market. So we could see some pressure on the block cheese price and drag that block barrel average lower through the month of May. That plays out in a lower milk price as we come through the spring. However,
I like a however.
as we clear some of that inventory and move into what would be presumably summer heat, and we see milk production recede a little bit, which is seasonal and normal,
right?
Against that smaller cow herd, we could very well start to see a little bit of tightness. And coming into that period when buyers are wanting to, build up their inventories going into the big fall consumption period, all the holiday cheese trays and football season, the whole 9 yards, right? As we come into that period, that could really show up as some better milk prices. And we're telling guys to be realistic about that. Look back at history. We generally trade milk between about a $13 and $18 range. We start moving towards those prices. They should be something to do something about,
right.
not just watch
not
passively.
Just watch. Yeah, that's right. Do something about it. All right, appreciate it, Mike, as always. And we'll be back with more Ag Day here in just a minute.
Cut through the uncertainty in the markets. Give Mike a call at 608-764-0012. Join Andrew McRae for Farming the Countryside, a farmer-focused podcast that is all about production agriculture. Farming the Countryside is available wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and is brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, the world's largest provider of crop inputs and services.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Our meteorologist Cindy Clausen looking at the weather map this morning, and look at that, more precipitation right there in the middle of the country.
I know, it's like it just won't shut off, right? I know, a lot of folks are hoping for that. We'll start to dry out just a little bit in parts. Let's take a look at what's going on. We've had this frontal system that's been kind of stretched all the way through the Corn Belt and into the plains for a few days now. Finally, we get this kind of culminating low that's going to be moving off to the east, but it's a strong one. We're going to see showers and thunderstorms all along this frontal boundary and low pressure system up in the Great Lakes, even some snowflakes in our far northern reaches there. Also some snow out in the higher elevations of mainly the Rockies. Putting this into motion, you can see that low that's starting to move into the upper lakes. Showers and thunderstorms along and ahead of that cold frontal boundary. And we still have that low over in the Four Corners region, so look for some spotty precipitation there, rain, and then higher elevation snow. Heading into tonight, we're going to be seeing the low pressure system move up into southeastern Canada. That moves the rain into the northeastern United States, but the trailing cold front still keeps wet weather down in parts of the southern plains, getting into the central Gulf Coast states. We still see some of that higher elevation snow on Friday, especially in Colorado and into parts of New Mexico. And that front moves off to the east. We're going to see that bringing more rain all across the eastern seaboard, while we maybe get a chance to dry out shortly in parts of the Corn Belt. Let's take a look at that precipitation. It has been a lot, especially down in Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas. That's where we've seen the heaviest amounts. And as we add in the next 24 hours, it doesn't get a lot better, especially for those same areas. We are looking at another round of very heavy rainfall. This is not good news for the southern part of the United States. In fact, we're going to be seeing wet weather in a good chunk of the country over the next 24 hours. Snowfall estimate mainly in the higher elevations in the west and just right along the border there. So you can see some of the colder air that's still hanging out up there. Look at those temperatures. Highs only in the 40s and 50s, even into the 30s there in Denver. Some of those higher elevations being a little chillier, but it's 80s and 90s down south. Heading into the overnight hours we go, and we're going to see those temperatures not too bad. We'll see some 30s and 40s behind that front, 60s and 70s out ahead of it. And then we'll start to warm up a little bit behind the front, but immediately behind the front, it's still a little bit on the cool side as you've got some rain and clouds. Now, as we take a quick look at the jet stream, you got that trough in the southwest, still a cutoff low is what our model is showing. Couple of smaller troughs going through the Great Lakes and into the northeast, but some warmer weather remains in the west as we get into next week. That's your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Searchlight, Nevada, showers and thunderstorms for you today with a high of 71 degrees. Eureka, South Dakota, mostly sunny with a high of 53. And Dog Walk, Kentucky, showers and thunderstorms as well with a high of 77.
Flash flood warnings are up along Texas Gulf Coast. As much as 10 inches of rain fell on some areas around Houston on Wednesday, and forecasters warn the storms could continue to batter the area with more rain later this week. All that wet weather is having a pretty interesting impact on pasture and range conditions. Up next, we'll take a look. And later, it's bigger than a 747. The big boy locomotive makes its return to the rails. The story in the country.
Drover's Report is sponsored by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont, your partner in range and pasture productivity.
Planting season continues to crawl along, but all the rain is good news for feed conditions in several areas of the country. Drovers reporting pasture and range conditions are much improved this year over last year, with 60% reported as good to excellent.
One of the big issues is we used up most of our hay stocks through this tough winter, and we will need a above average growing season this year to replenish those. For grazing season, May 1's typically the normal turnout time we see. One of the places that we monitor is the Kansas Flint Hills. Kansas Flint Hills grass are growing obviously very well. Ponds are full and replenished, and the grass is growing well.
A worry right now for ranchers, grass pastures getting too wet due to all this rain. Alternative protein maker Beyond Meat continuing to pump up traders. Shares of the company climbing roughly 225% higher than on its IPO day of May 2nd. The jump driven by positive ratings on its ability to manufacture and deliver product to market. Farm Journal talked to one professor at Kansas State asking him about why we're seeing more businesses like these.
The carrot for those businesses to exist is actually a good thing for the industry because it's growing global demand for protein. I don't anticipate that to go away, and therefore I don't anticipate these new alternative sources of protein to go away. But exactly how they're labeled and how the public responds to them is certainly to be determined.
Grab a seat and hold on to your hat. The big boy rolling through for the first time in 70 years. We'll tell you why next.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
It wasn't that long ago that the best way to travel cross-country was by train. Some people still think that. And starting this week, a year-long celebration of the Transcontinental Railroad, now 150 years old. A party rolling along with help from a nearly 80-year-old steam locomotive. 150 years in the making.
We wouldn't have missed this for the world.
The big boy, number 4014, rolling across the Wyoming plains near Cheyenne.
Well, it's going to be the largest operational steam engine in the world. You know, I mean, how can you not get excited about that?
Longer than two city buses, weighing more than a fully loaded Boeing 747, and able to pull the equivalent of 16 Statues of Liberty over a mountain. The big boy making a reappearance after some 70 years of retirement.
Back in the 1940s, when freight railroads were moving a lot of things, you know, with steam power, you needed a big locomotive to get over that hill.
Big boy engines hauled freight between Wyoming and Utah in the 1940s and 50s. Of the 25 built by the American Locomotive Company in Schenectady, New York from 1941 to 1944, 8 remain.
When we built the Transcontinental Railroad back in the 1800s, I mean, how are you going to get over the Rocky Mountains was very key.
Today, thanks to 5 years of restoration, only number 4014 is operational.
You look inside the cab, you see all the knobs, you better know what you're turning.
That's our water level right here.
Ed Dickens headed up the restoration.
It looks really complex and complicated, somewhat intimidating. When you learn about steam locomotives, all of those valves have a specific purpose.
Operating the big boy requires a 2-person crew to monitor the 1.2 million pound machine.
Because we rebuilt this, we designed everything to customize what I want as an engineer and what the fireman wants as a fireman. So as I'm sitting right here positioned looking out as I need to, The speedometer is right in line with me. Everything's within easy reach. The whistle's just a little right here.
Engineered for those steep mountain grades, each big boy was built with 2 huge engines beneath a 250-ton boiler. A feat still drawing crowds 150 years past the first Golden Spike. Pretty incredible. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.